right, Todd. Air is magic. My name's Tom Hinkle and I'm with Vaprox Flares. I'd like to take the time today for a short video to show you how a Vaprox Quado flare will help your company to meet compliance when it comes to the state level and the federal level and the Quado A compliance rules. This is a standard Vaprox flare, one of our larger models. It's a 10 by 18 and it's a 42-inch base. And what I'd like to do is go over the features that are going to meet the two rules that we're looking for in a conventional open flame flare. First rule is zero emissions, and we achieve that by adding a blower, ESD safety valve, stainless steel hose, and a manual valve, which I'll come back to after I discuss the air-assisted flare tip. But these components are all necessary in order to add the air that's going to be necessary for you to have a smoke-free burn. If we can come over here to our air-assisted tip, what I'd like to show you about a Vaprox flare is that we're going to use an independent riser to deliver the right amount of oxygen to the flare so that it can treat the low pressure gas that needs to meet the Quado A permit. So as your blower is delivering the correct amount of volume to the flare tip, it's going to actually come up through this blower riser at the end of your flare stack. Now this blower is going to come into the wind guard of this flare tip, and it's going to begin to mix with the low pressure gas which is delivered through this secondary riser on the other side. All the mixing happens inside the flare tip. So we want to achieve 10 parts oxygen to 1 part methane. If we can achieve that mixture, we can achieve zero emissions and you'll have a smoke-free flare. That mixing needs to happen before the spot of the pilot so that we have a good mixture leaving the flare as opposed to trying to treat the low pressure gases that's already leaving the flare. Coming back over here to the blower feature on this flare, because we've added oxygen to the flare, it's going to require that we add some safety features. This is a spring fail close, high performance, graphite packed, fireproof butterfly valve, and it positions itself just downstream the outlet of the blower. This is important in case the blower loses power and you've got perhaps a heavier or a buildup of heavier hydrocarbons that have lingered in your blower riser. If your blower has lost power and you have these heaviers in the riser, then there's a possibility that these heavier hydrocarbons would ignite and come right out this grill and kind of act as a flamethrower. Vaprox started using this valve a couple of years ago on a suggestion of an engineer of one of our clients. One of the things that Vaprox has done is we truly listen to our clients as they custom build the flare to their needs. When they make a recommendation or a suggestion that we see the importance of, then we adopt that recommendation into our design. Just downstream the safety valve, you've also got a stainless steel hose along with a manual valve. The hose is just to take out the vibration of the blower. The manual valve is there as a secondary safety feature in case you've got a situation where your flare is down or your blower is down. Not only do you want to use your safety valve, but you also want to manually close off that blower riser just to prevent any kind of possibility for an accident. Vaprox uses a gear pump to evacuate liquids. What makes a dual pressure flare is not only just handling 2 gas streams, but it's also handling 2 liquids. What Vaprox has done here is built an integral scrubber into its base so that you have 2 separate chambers, one to handle your low pressure line, which will inlet right here. Secondary is your high pressure line above it, so you have 2 separate chambers to handle that. If you'll notice, we use actuators and butterfly valves on the liquid process so that we can prevent any kind of backlash or high pressure going against your low pressure. We also have installed some manual ball valves here just for the use of maintenance. When you're keeping up with your flare or you're doing your PMs, you want to have a way of evacuating these liquids without having to use the pump. And speaking of the pump, Vaprox uses latching relays and 2 level switches to control the liquid on, in this case, the low pressure side. And so what happens is your liquids are building up here. Once it hits your first level switch, it actuates the system. It doesn't turn the pump on, but it does make the pump ready. As your liquids increase, which you can notice in your sight glass, it hits the second level switch, and that's what turns the pump on. Pump kicks on, pumps off this distance of liquid, pump turns off. That's important because we're not using it like a snap control, or some folks may use a throttle control, but we want to evacuate that much liquid and also leave liquid in the bottom section so that we don't lose prime. Same thing's happening above. You have your pump actuated, pump on, pumps down the liquids, pump off. Now you'll notice we have a 3rd level switch here. This 3rd level switch on both your lower side and your higher side is an emergency level switch that would allow you to tie in from your automation, and it'll turn the flare off. It'll also turn off at your wellhead if you so choose to use that. On this particular flare, which we've prepared for Apache, Apache's automation group has elected to use a solenoid valve to cut off the supply gas going to the pilot in case a high level switch is actuated. This is a good last line of defense if your flare is not burning at the time. Of course, this would be successful. If your flare is burning, there's still a chance that the liquids that were going out the top of the flare would catch fire. So, but it is probably the best that you can do as far as trying to shut off the pilot in case of a dump valve upstream not operating correctly, or something that would otherwise cause liquids to go out the top of the flare or actuate your high level switch. What we just spoke about with the blower is treating the first rule that we're trying to accomplish in Quad OA, which is 0 emissions. So we do that with the blower. Going to the second rule that we're trying to achieve is going to be proof of pilot. We use a Moore transmitter to control the communication from the pilot to the client's SCADA system, or their whatever automation system they may be using. ROC is one that we have seen some of our clients use. I believe that's what Cimarex uses. However, the Moore transmitter, in this case, the one that we've selected, it's doing several things here, Todd. One is it's got target controls where you can set a target temperature coming off of your thermocouple probe, and you can use those targets to create a dry contact. Say you want your flare to reignite at a certain temperature, or you're wanting to send that communication out to the SCADA like we said earlier. This particular unit has the ability of 4 outputs. So you can have a Modbus, or you can have a 4 to 20 milliamp output. Very friendly to the automations guys. We hear that they like it. We do have a system that could be completely enclosed inside your enclosure, but like we mentioned earlier, with Cimarex Energy, who we sell flares to, they like to have this display mounted outside of the control box, so that when their pumper pulls through the location, he can just see that he's got pilot burning. So that's going to give him a temperature, or a current temperature, that pilot is burning at this time. You also see that we've displayed a K-type thermocouple probe, which is what we use. Now secondary, Vaprox uses that target temperature to communicate to the controls that it's lost pilot. And for example, say we're used to seeing an 800 or 900 degree pilot. If that 800 or 900 degrees drops below 600 degrees, we're going to assume that means the flare has extinguished. For whatever reason, we need to get it reignited. I hope that I've covered the two items that I was trying to explain to the viewer of what makes Vaprox Quad-O flare Quad-O. And just to recap, there's two items that we're trying to reach here. One is zero emissions, and we're accomplishing that through the air-assisted flare tip. So we've gone over that, as well as the second being proof of pilot. Just to clarify on that, we use a thermocouple up above the pilot that's going to present an output to the Moore transmitter, which is going to take that output, or take that input, and then convert it to 4 separate outputs, depending on what you're using it for. In our case, we're going to use one of those outputs to control the ignition assembly. We're going to want to control that to make sure that we are burning, and that if we have some reason lost pilot or created an event, that would be properly recorded for the energy company. And then finally, we can use the secondary output to send a signal to their SCADA, whichever way they're used to collecting it. I know in our two main customers, which are Cimarex and Apache, both of those companies use a total flow, and they take the output from the Moore as an input to the total flow, and from there that will upload to their SCADA so that they can keep a good documentation. One last thing I want to point out is Vaprox has a service team that's out in the Permian Basin, and these guys are just constantly, day in and day out, they're doing service calls, they're doing regular scheduled PMs. Those regular scheduled PMs, they'll wash flame arresters and make sure we keep the crud out. They bring down the pilot system, make sure that the venturis are cleaned out and that we got a good solid pilot. Just do a once over across the entire flare. They'll also perform a method 22 test, which will let the client know that they are remaining in compliance. And all of this is done on just a regular scheduled maintenance call. And they will record this, okay? And so they bring that recorded field ticket back into Vaprox's home office, and we set it up on an Excel and just keep track so that we can have those records in case the state ever asks for them. So, and that also will let the operator know if they're having a particular issue with one flare. That helps us to identify what that issue is. So I hope I've covered everything, and if you got any questions, call me or email me.